This
Make it.
conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so I'm Bob Platt, and this is the April 14th uh, Arlington Senior Democratic Lunch. We have 3 guests. We're going to try to give them all adequate time and move through them because they do have time constraints. Our first guest is Dan Helmer, and Dan began his political career with a primary bid in the 10th Congressional District in 2018. In 2019, he was elected to the House of Delegates, where he's worked on health care costs, SNAP benefits, and gun control laws. His grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and he's the son of immigrants. He's a West Point graduate and served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And most important of all, he ran the 2025 Marine Corps Marathon in a time of 4 hours, 24 minutes, and 24 seconds. So I give you Dan Helmer, who will look into this camera.
Wait, just so I can move a bit, can I pull this? Would it be all right if I pull the computer over here so I can stand and talk?
Yes, but
Yeah.
you have to lean.
Okay, I'll lean it way back. All right. All right, there you go. All right. I think there's nobody live on here, right? This is just video?
Well, there could be. There
Okay.
could be if they tune in. Some of them, come in and out.
All
But
right, well,
yes, there's no one live now.
all right, well, I'll give them a minute to get situated. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm Dan Helmer. I'm campaigns chair for the House Democratic Caucus. It's really nice to see a few familiar faces here and to meet some new folks. I'm very grateful for all that we have done together and all that we have left to do. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the son of an immigrant and the grandson of Holocaust survivors, and there is just nobody who knows this crazy 7th district better than I do. I represent a district in Fairfax County in the House where I live with my wife, Karen, who is an assistant principal and proud union member in our public schools, where our 2 boys have gone, and one's graduated, one's about to graduate. I run a business here in Arlington, and as campaigns chair, I've campaigned sending MAGA Republicans home from Arlington to Fairfax to Fauquier to Rockingham to Goochland, you name a place in this district, and I've been out there campaigning. I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm running for office. In 2003, I just graduated West Point as another president, got us involved in another insane war of choice. And I lost my first friend in April of 2004. We had gone to airborne school. We had learned to drive tanks together. He was a Virginian. We had just gotten married. Just like that, he was gone. A couple months later, I lost my second friend. And one of the things that made this a very dark moment for me is knowing that we didn't just lose them to Iraqi insurgents, but to politicians in Washington who viewed them as cannon fodder to make them look tough in the next election. So I knew we had to do something different, and I thought a lot about what I could do. And I ended up standing up a national training center in Afghanistan 2 years later. I figured that if we couldn't get politicians to do the right thing, at least we could make sure that fewer Americans and Afghans paid the consequences of their lack of courage.
That's back when you weren't getting the right protective equipment.
All of that. Yeah, all of that was going on. You see, in my family, I've always learned that no matter how many times you get knocked down, you get back up and keep fighting. And so that's why when Donald Trump was elected and he started to go to war on our democracy, I knew I couldn't sit on the sideline. As he undermined the social safety net to take away benefits for seniors and the average American, to put money in the pockets of billionaires like his buddy Elon Musk, I knew I couldn't sit idly by. So I ran for office. 2019, I unseated a 17-year Republican incumbent, became the first Democrat to ever represent my seat. 4 years later, I led the first successful effort in 60 years to flip a chamber of the General Assembly while the other party had the governor's mansion. And then this past year, I led the successful effort to send 13 MAGA Republicans home, electing the most progressive, most diverse majority in Virginia history. And we did it by fighting in every single one of the 100 seats in the Commonwealth, and by recruiting candidates who looked like their communities, came from their communities, accountants, single moms, military veterans, small business owners, people who themselves had seen how the American dream was slipping by for too many people like them and were credible in the fight to change. And with that new majority, we got right to work fighting for Virginians, passing the constitutional amendment to protect abortion rights and gay marriage and voting rights, and the redistricting amendment that's allowing us to have this opportunity to fight back against Donald Trump. We passed bills that I have been fighting for years. So after the terrible shooting in Aurora, in Colorado, I learned of the parents there who had tried to sue the irresponsible dealers and manufacturers whose irresponsibility contributed to the death of their child. And they had been denied in court because Colorado didn't have a public nuisance law that allowed you to sue them. For years, I fought to pass that here in Virginia until this year, just a few days ago, that bill was signed by the governor. We took on the cost of health care, passing a first of its kind in the country hospital price transparency bill, and a bill that just got signed by the governor yesterday that mandates we look at Medigap coverage to make sure it's affordable for seniors. And with ICE coming into our communities, I became member of a special subcommittee and co-led the efforts as the chief co-patron of bills to unmask the ICE agents terrorizing our communities and make sure they couldn't go into our churches, into our schools, into our places of worship. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who come in front of you in the 7th district and tell you they're going to be fighters who are going to stand up to Donald Trump. But how many of them have actually done it successfully? We need fighters who aren't just going to throw a punch on Donald Trump. We need fighters who are going to land that punch. And time and again, whether it's working on the hardest legislation or electing Democrats to positions, I've sent 18 MAGA Republicans home in my time in office, including the one I sent home myself. Whether it's the assault weapons ban, which I introduced for the first time as chief co-patron in 2020. Then it was vetoed by the governor, and people were sending my family, not just me, my family, death threats. And in spite of all that, we stood up and we passed it this year, and it is going to get signed by Abigail Spanberger. It's about taking on the corporate special interests who have gone after me time and again. But I've never taken a dime of corporate PAC money, and I never will, because I believe the focus should be on your pocket and not on theirs. So we have a big choice to make in this coming election. Between the do nothing, go along to get along Democrats who have nothing to show but a shattered country and Donald Trump, or a fighter who has been in the arena and has the scars and the bruises to prove it. Now, I haven't won every election I've ever been in. I haven't won every fight. And no matter how many times I get knocked down, I get up and I fight for Virginia and our country because I know that it's a fight that's worth fighting for. So if you're looking for someone who's going to take that fight to Washington, who's going to tackle the corruption and the meanness and the attacks on our democracy and the cost of living, if you're looking for that fighter and who's going to do it while sending MAGA Republicans packing again and again and has the proven track record to not just say it, but have done it, then I hope to have your support in the coming election in August. And with that, I'm all yours, and I'll take your. Oh, the last thing I'll say is I've been endorsed by Governor Ralph Northam, Congressman Eugene Vindman, more than half the Democrats in the General Assembly, and dozens of local elected officials. More than 80 elected officials, Democrats, have endorsed our campaign because they know that we need a proven fighter. But of course, the important endorsement is yours. So, love to have your support.
Thank you for your remarks. I get the prerogative of the first question, and that is, in my opinion, one of the the big achievements of our society since World War II is the creation of an apolitical, very unified military force. And I've been reading that, for example, someone took the list of one-star generals for promotion and crossed off 4 names. And someone, yes, and someone decided that the head of the military district of Washington should not be a black woman because it would look bad. So given these sorts of developments, I'd like to have your insight as an Army veteran as to, how we can sort of heal that and restore our apolitical military and, restore our national unity.
Yeah. I think it's really important. And, I never asked the person sitting next to me in a Humvee in Afghanistan, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat, right? We came together in common cause to do what we needed to do on behalf of our country. And that is the ethos that we need in military service. And one of the most shameful things about this administration is their attacks on black officers and LGBTQ officers and enlisted, and their desire to remove female officers from senior levels in the ranks. And of course, in a military that is majority minority, the idea that we would remove senior leaders who come from backgrounds similar to the troops that they learn is totally anathema to military service. Now, I have been fighting that good fight for a long time. I've spent the last 7 years combating the scourge of sexual assault at VMI. In 2020, when I passed a law, first law I ever passed, to challenge sexual assault on college campuses by encouraging women to report, VMI forced through an exemption in the Senate. For every single year after that, I named and shamed them and fought that fight until finally this year, the governor signed yesterday our bill that removes the exemption from VMI for that reporting bill, because I believe that leaders of character in the military ought not to come from an institution that doesn't protect victims of sexual assault. I've taken on the Confederacy at VMI. In fact, I've taken it on so much that Sean Parnell, who's the spokesperson for the department, the so-called Department of War, came after my bill this year, and I turned around, looked him in the face, and passed it anyway, because I said that we can't be celebrating traitors at the Virginia Military Institute instead of on the floor of the House Delegates. So how are we going to get there? We're going to get there by making sure we have an officer corps and senior enlisted corps that represents the military broadly. We're going to stop the politicization of our service academies. I know you're a Naval Academy graduate. I'm a West Point graduate. We see they're pulling the books out of the library that they don't think are okay. We got to stop that. And we need to encourage an officer corps and a senior enlisted corps and the recruitment of people from all over the country to represent America. That's how we fix it. And we certainly do it by having people in leadership positions in Congress who have served in the military and understand that ethos. I am the only person running in this as an elected member who has served in the military. And I think if you want to depoliticize the military, you need the expertise of somebody like me to serve in it.
And they're leaving in the library Mein Kampf.
They are. Absolutely insane.
Okay, does someone have the second question? Steve, do you want to ask one? Or?
No, let somebody else answer.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You probably said, but please tell me what district you're running in and where that district is for this election and the redistricting we left.
So I'm running in the new District 7. So the new,
Which is all of Arlington.
North Arlington, and then it runs through Falls Church, Fairfax, Prince William, Fauquier. Don't make me do all 17 counties, but it goes out to Powhatan, south of Richmond on one side, and then it goes out to like Orange and all those places on the other side. So it's the so-called lobster.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's no incumbent.
The division is roughly Columbia Place, is that right? Or
For the Arlington?
Route 50.
Route 50.
Yeah, Route 50,
Okay.
yeah. Does not include McLean. There are five districts that go through Fairfax County. Oh, yes, ma'am.
If the amendment doesn't pass, then what is your?
I mean, I'm the chair of a powerful committee in the House. I'm the campaigns chair. I will always serve my country in whatever way that I am able. I'm running. I'm a member of the House. Yeah, I don't give up my seat by doing this. Yeah.
He's not up for reelection next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
But it's not, but you're not running it at all.
Yeah, we're gonna get this thing passed, and I'm gonna be running this out. Yeah. I hear you, Herschel.
Well, who's your present congressman? Is it
Walkinshaw. Yeah, yeah.
I asked what I've been asking for 10 years. Maybe you're not talking about people. I'm concerned that people, general voters, not people in this room, general voters are not concerned about democracy. That they don't believe that we're on the edge of losing the democratic experiment. So I guess the question would be, are you emphasizing that? And if you're emphasizing that, are people responding to that particular thing? Because I have to believe there's a way of selling the idea that your medical care and your gun control and everything else is going to be lost if we don't have democracy.
Absolutely. Herschel, I'm the only candidate in this race right now who's been endorsed by labor unions. I have 5 labor unions that have endorsed me. I bring that up because I believe that for Democrats to win, that democracy starts with working class families believing that government is invested in them. And so I have gone all over Virginia. There is nobody who's knocked more doors in more districts than I have, because I've literally gone with every single one of these candidates who won and some of them who lost and knocked doors in their district. And what I hear from people is they don't say to me necessarily, Dan Helmer, I'm looking for democracy. What they say is, I'm tired of a government that doesn't understand how hard it is for the American dream to work for my family. And if you don't believe in that, if you don't believe that politicians are responsive to the things you care about, if you don't believe that government is on your side, if you don't believe that your elected representative cares about you and your family, your ability to put food on the table, to do a little bit better than that, take your family on vacation, then democracy isn't there. And I think the challenge that we have and what's in front of us is that if Donald Trump gets his way and removes the ability to have free and fair elections, then of course there is no focus on working class families, because it's your ability to vote and hold people accountable that actually ensures that our government is focused on you. And those are the conversations I've had for the last decade. It's why I'm the first representative, Democrat to represent my seat. It's how we've won all of these districts all over Virginia. I mean, nobody believed, when I said we were going to go after 13 Republicans this year, everybody looked at me funny. They're like, you're going to win 5 Trump districts? That's not going to happen, right? That's bigger than you've had in 40 years. And the reason we were able to do it is actually people do care about democracy. They do have a chance. They need candidates to inspire them. They need people who are willing to go out and do the work. They need to believe that at the end of the day, you care about the issues that matter most. Yes, ma'am.
What type of, how would you label yourself? What type of Democrat are you?
Oh, I love that question. I'm a winning Democrat. I'm a fighting Democrat. I'm a fighter for the working class. I'm a person who has taken on the toughest lobbies in Virginia and DC and beat them again and again, whether that's the gun lobby and the NRA, whether that is taking on the corporate PACs who have tried to influence Virginia politics and passing bills that they don't like. So whatever kind of Democrat that makes me, a Democrat who sends MAGA Republicans packing and passes the bills that align with our values, that's the one that I don't know where that puts me on the spectrum. I mean, I'm the only, as far as I know, the only Democrat running this race that voted to repeal so-called right to work in Virginia. I am also a Democrat who kept fighting to make sure we get the majority so we could pass the abortion rights amendment, right? So wherever that puts me on the spectrum, I'm proud to be there.
You went to the
West Point.
Point.
Sir, you insult.
I'm too influenced by this fellow.
That's right.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Jersey.
Okay.
So I went to, my poor mom had to sign my paperwork to let me go to West Point because I was still 17.
Right.
So she had to sign the paperwork for me to go. And then from West Point, I got stationed everywhere. I did 10 duty stations over the course of 11 years of active.
North Jersey?
South Jersey, right at South Philly. I'm an Eagles fan.
Oh, okay, all right.
Good.
Now that we have that settled.
Yes, ma'am. Now I'm a Virginian.
Where are you on this whole casino thing?
Oh, I voted no. I voted no. I just think, and in fact, when Virginia went to start building casinos in the first place, I was one of only a handful of Democrats who voted no then as well. I've seen firsthand the consequences of gambling, addiction. I believe that we need to create more jobs for working families in Virginia. And so I think there are some people with good motives who are on the other side. But at the end of the day, I believe it is more important than ever that we get a system in place to make sure we fully fund education, make sure we're creating the jobs that matter. And I don't, in many ways, gambling is just a regressive tax. And, the challenge these days is, every single person has a gambling machine in their pocket. So we're playing a lot of defense. I mean, in the last couple of years, I've had to vote for bills that actually regulate and limit as opposed to just ban, because we have these 90,000 gray machines or whatever in Virginia, right? These so-called skill games that are really just slot machines. But we voted for a bill this year that put a bounty on the illegal ones. I'm like, okay, I can get with that, right? But overall, I just think that the casino was never going to be the economic development boom that was promised. And at the end of the day, you can't just do things without getting the community engaged and involved, and the community was never there.
Steve Herbert?
The one of your probable competitors is Coney, who worked with Jack Smith, on the attempted prosecutions of Trump. That may not be as fruitful of a path to go down right now as perhaps trying to impeach some of Trump's clown car cabinet. I'm wondering if you have, any thoughts along that line.
Yeah, I believe we need somebody in the seat who hasn't just attempted to take on Donald Trump, but has done it successfully, right? Trump got elected, I unseated a 17-year Republican incumbent. He got elected again, I kept us in the majority so that we can pass a constitutional amendment to fight back when he started gerrymandering. And every single day that I am in Congress, I will make sure we do all that we can to bring the American people with us, to pass the legislation where we can find common cause that makes their lives better, and then to hold every one of these clowns who are undermining our democracy accountable now and in the future, and figure out ways. You know what? He's going around there telling them he's going to pardon them at the end of his term, right? And so we need to put in place the infrastructure today to make sure every single one of them knows that there will be accountability coming, even if a pardon.
So one of the things that's very distressing is the amount of apparent corruption right now. And Hillary Clinton just went on TV saying that Democrats should run on affordability and accountability. And I was wondering, what were your views on sort of addressing the insider trading, sweetheart deals, and so on of the current administration?
Yeah. The first bill I'll sign on to when I get into Congress is the one that prohibits insider trading by members, because I believe that it fully corrupts our democracy. Look, I am the only leader in Virginia politics in history, campaigns chair, that didn't take corporate PAC money. And I did it because I believe that every single Virginian should be able to look you in the eyes and know that you are there for the people that elected you, not for special interests. Right? That's unique. My job was to elect a Democratic majority. It was a really hard thing to do. In 60 years, that had never been done, and I still said, we're going to do it with the support of individual people, and that's how we're going to get there, and I was able to do it and win. I've shown that being for Virginians, not being for special interests, is not only good policy, but it's winning politics that helps elect Democrats and makes people believe that democracy is on their side here.
Any other questions?
Well, I just,
Go ahead.
I'm not sure what the question is, but insider trading and corporate PAC money are old fashioned. The president has set up something where people can just send him money.
Right.
And he's also raised it so the government can pay him for all the injuries he's suffered. Well,
Criminal
and-
codes.
And there seems to be a lot of insider trading on news from Iran. You know, the president will issue a tweet and then just go for let people to make investments.
And I guess the question is, why aren't people more upset by this? It's sort of as if, well, if the bribery is open, it must be okay. If it's gold bars, then it's bad, but if you just hand the gold bars to the president, then, you know,
Or open a
and the
cryptocurrency.
cameras are there, then it's okay.
I hear you, Herschel. You know, in August of last year, everybody was going around saying, okay, Donald Trump is going to deny Democratic accountability because he just got Texas to redistrict, he got North Carolina to district. There were a bunch of people on Twitter saying, well, maybe we could do something in Virginia. But there's no plan. Never before had a constitutional amendment been passed without outside of the regular session of the General Assembly. And there's a reason the New York Times calls me an architect of that response, because I look at these things and say, actually, we don't have to be bound by what's happened before. We got to find ways different. I agree with you, Herschel. There are people who are paying off the president today, but we might not be able to go after every official, but we need to put every single company on notice, whether it's they're helping tear down the White House or they're helping facilitate these transactions that help pay off the president, that winter is coming. And there will be accountability if you were part of this corrupt scheme to enable a lawless president to make money on the backs of the American people at the expense of policy that supported Americans on the back of an illegal war in Iran. If you are profiting from that, you should be on notice that there's going to be a new sheriff in town, and Trump doesn't have a history of taking care of all of his friends, right? And so by making sure that every single person knows that if you participate, even we can't get every American to care about it, Herschel. Even we can't get everyone in America, we can get every single one of these folks who are enabling his corrupt schemes to know that accountability is coming, and that's what I'm going to do in Congress.
Including the law firms who sold out when they didn't have
It's insane, right?
And any other questions? Otherwise, we'll have Dan summarize for just 1 or 2 minutes and tell us your website and so on, please.
Well, thank you again so much for having me. Dan Helmer, if you didn't figure it out by now, running for the 7th, the new 7th, the Lobster District, endorsed by Governor Northam, Congressman Eugene Vindman, more than half the elected Democrats in the General Assembly who believe that we need a fighter who can not just throw a punch on Donald Trump, but who can land that with a proven track record of time and again taking on the toughest fights in Virginia and winning them. Of course, the most important endorsement is yours. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to danhelmer.com. You can email me, dan@danhelmer.com. It's real hard to remember. We'd love to have you volunteer. We'd love to have you give a little money, give a lot of money, because we need to change the course of what's happening in Virginia and our country, and winning this seat is a key step. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me. I'll sit back here for a little bit.
Yes, yes, please do.
I have to-
All right.
Look, it's talking too long.
Well, our second guest is Michael Duffin, and Michael had a distinguished career in the federal service, which he'll tell you about on a first-hand basis. He lives in Arlington. He has 2 children, ages 2 and 7. I guess one of them is in the Arlington Public Schools.
Alexandria.
Oh, Alexandria, I'm sorry. Forgive me. And since leaving the federal government, he's been working closely with the AFGE, and I'm sure he'll tell you about that. And he has a lot of exciting ideas. And just to be clear, he's running in the new 8th district. So he would be voting with those people in Arlington who live south of Route 50. Without further ado, I'll give you Michael Duffin.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoy your lunch, and I hope to have a conversation with you. I do have a stump speech, but I've been told that we want to hear from you as a person and not, what I typed out on the computer. But I worked at the State Department for 12 years. The last decade was in counterterrorism. I developed the first programs to counter white supremacy overseas. And for that, last July, I was one of over 1,000 civil servants, plus about 200, 300 foreign service officers who were ripped by DOGE. That obviously impacted me greatly, not just me personally, but seeing my coworkers, people I had worked with, dedicated non-partisan public servants who abided by the Hatch Act all throughout their careers, which, if you don't know, basically says if you're a public servant, you can't engage. You could vote, you could donate, but you can't talk about it on social media. You can't be part of a campaign. You can't run for office. And so that was who I was, a non-partisan public servant. But we were shown the door last July, along with 300,000 plus federal employees around, across the country. As you know, the Washington, D.C. area went from having one of the lowest unemployment levels in the country, a booming economy, to having one of the highest. And now people I have 3 master's degrees, 1 in journalism and 2 in international relations. People like myself having a difficult time finding a job. Now they either have to drive for Uber, work at Starbucks, and it's ridiculous. I mean, there's value in working, whatever your job is. I respect that. But when you can't pay your bills, when you're going to lose your home, as many of my coworkers are facing that threat, we need someone to stand up. And so that's why I decided to run for office. I did not aspire to be a career politician. I want to ensure that our voices are heard. Federal employees, our work matters. And so we've seen the consequences at the State Department specifically with Donald Trump waging this illegal war in Iran. He fired the energy experts, the oil experts who specialize in the Middle East, who had the contacts with the oil companies. So if he was going to go forward with this, regardless, this illegal war, at least he could have kept the experts who know how to engage the oil companies to, who could have developed a plan, who could have warned him that, hey, if you start a war with Iran, it's going to lead to gas prices going up $1, $2, destroying our economy. And so I know this now, being on a budget, because my wife still works for the federal government, but this is a very expensive area, as you know. We need two salaries every household. We have 2 young kids, and I feel the pinch of the economy. And so us having to pay an extra $50 a week for gas takes away from investing into our kids. And so I want to ensure that we have choice at the ballot. As a voter in the 8th district, I'm in the current 8th, and regardless of the outcome of the referendum, I'll stay in the 8th. I'm a resident of Alexandria. I'm originally from Chicago. My father was a police officer. He worked for the Chicago Police Department, retired there. But I grew up in a working class neighborhood, and so even as someone who has 3 master's degrees, I understand growing up in an area that was filled with cops and firemen and other city workers, what it's like to struggle. But I also know that my dad is a police officer and my mom is a homemaker for a while, and she earned her GED in her 30s. But I understand, I know how my father on his police officer salary was able to own a home and put 3 kids through college, and that's not possible anymore. The challenge we have in Northern Virginia, and obviously if the redistricting passes, the district will expand. So, my pitch will expand to engaging voters in rural parts of Virginia. This district is going to go from all the way to Crystal City in the north to Yorktown in the south. So it's going to be very expansive. I do support the redistricting. As we discussed early on, no one likes to have to look up which district, who's your congressperson, or which district you're going to vote in. But we understand the urgency of the moment, so I support that. But the reality that we have in Northern Virginia is that our cops or firefighters, and our teachers who serve in Arlington, who serve in Alexandria, most of them don't live in this area. And it's not because they don't want to, I personally love the diversity of Northern Virginia. My wife is an immigrant. I like the fact that her accent, people don't ask her every day, oh, where are you from? You're not from, and I love the fact that my children can grow up in, around people of different backgrounds. But the problem, as I was saying, it's rent is high. People have student loans, young professionals, and our futures are uncertain because of what Donald Trump and Doge has done to the federal service. So I have 3 priorities. One, it's reinstating federal employees. I believe every member or no member of Congress is doing enough to fight for federal employees. That includes Representative Byer, with all due respect, but also includes a lot of other people that I'm not running against. And so the urgency of reinstatement, I cannot tell you how important it is. I've worked with my local union, AFGE 1534. We've engaged members of Congress. They tell us Democrats have to retake the House and hopefully the Senate in November. Hopefully that happens, and then they're going to fight for reinstatement. Meanwhile, we're on unemployment. We're getting, not me personally, but my coworkers are getting notices that their homes are going to be foreclosed. And so we need to not just fight in Congress, but fight on the airwaves of Fox News, push back against this deep state narrative, because it's been uncontested for over a decade since Donald Trump took office. We have to articulate why the government matters, not just to Northern Virginia, which it's understood by most people, but in rural Nebraska, Oklahoma, and elsewhere. And unfortunately, they believe that the services that they're receiving are not impacted by the federal taxes that they pay or the federal workforce, whether it's FEMA or the U.S. DA. But the point is, number one, reinstating federal employees. Number two, it's reinvigorating our economy, our communities. And number three, it's reforming Congress. As Dan had said, I thank, he's not here, but I thank him for his service. He and other people have pointed out that if we want to go after Donald Trump, we also have to clean up our own house. And that includes stock trading, which Democrats are participating in. It includes looking at the funding that they're accepting, the corporate donations. I, as someone who had a top level security clearance, I had to be mindful of conflicts of interest. And how can we have members of Congress voting on defense packages when they're receiving corporate contributions from Boeing and all these other defense agencies? And so my point is, we need to clean up our house as much as we can. And regardless of the outcome of the election, which will be August 4th, I want to make sure that Democrats win the House and the Senate. I'm going to be a team player, and that's the message I want to send to you. And beyond 26, we need to make sure that we get our act together at 28, because the stakes in Northern Virginia are too high. If we have a President Vance or a President Rubio or President, fill in the blank on the Republican side, our economy is going to tank even further. So we need to work together as Democrats to bring in people from the left who sat out the last election, voted for Jill Stein or didn't vote at all. And we need to bring those people who are disgruntled, the Trump voters, the more moderate Republicans who can understand the message that we have of engaging working class families. Because I can tell you my background, I feel that the Democratic Party, as someone who has been a reliable Democratic voter my entire adult life, I'm dissatisfied with this party. And so even running as a Democrat, I could tell you, if we don't talk about the challenges that we're facing and the concerns that we have, I'm glad that Eric Swalwell, resigned, but there are more people who have conflicts of interest, and we need new blood. And that's the last point I want to make. Dan has run many elections. Some of them he's won, some of them he hasn't. I'm from Illinois. I remember when a young Barack Obama ran for the House in 2000. It was the only election that he lost. I'm not saying I'm going to lose, but I recognize that challenging an incumbent who's one of the wealthiest members of Congress. I have, my work cut out for me. But the point is, you have to start somewhere. And so for me, being a fired federal employee, people have said, well, why didn't you run for city council or this office or that office? Well, my issues with Donald Trump, my issues with Doge. And so I want to make sure whether I win or not, that the candidate who wins, the other candidates in the other districts are talking about federal employees, whether we have to wait until Democrats retake the House in January or hopefully sooner. We need to have legislation that reinstates us, pays us back wages and the lost benefits and some type of restitution, because people who are losing their homes, you could give them their salary back, but how do you repair the damages that the toll that's been taken off their families and their so and the federal government, the work the State Department and other agencies, HHS, it's needed. And it's just crazy to think in 2026 there's there are outbreaks of measles across the United States. And so we need to have a fact, we need to sell the rest of the country why the things that we value matter to everyone, are important to everyone. And so I'm happy to answer questions that you may have.
Okay. Well, I'll take the prerogative of asking the first question. You know that even if the most optimistic forecasts of the midterm elections come out, there'll still be a very substantial number of Republicans in the House and the Senate. And you also know that at this point, Trump appointees control a lot of the independent agencies and certainly the executive departments. So what would you envision in some detail as to what your role and your colleagues' roles would be in the next congressional term to deal with that opposing force?
It's important that we battle them in terms of the narratives, the Trump narratives. And so I would say legislatively, we need to force Donald Trump's hand to reinstate federal employees, to ensure that he doesn't start any more reckless wars. I think it's important he pays attention to poll numbers. And so when he sees his approval numbers declining, with independents and others, I don't want to say he's going to listen to that, but we need to force his hand. And so we need to increase our leverage as much as we can. And so, as you alluded to, hopefully we can flip some seats and defend the seats in the Senate. But I would just say that it's important that we throw the entire kitchen sink at Donald Trump.
I also think
Sure.
just blocking visual part of that.
That's another element. And the other question is, like, where do you stand on Citizens United? And several people, including I think Don Beyer at one point, actually offered a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. Where do you stand on funding of federal campaigns?
I would like federally funded. In an ideal world, we would have term limits of 12 years. We could debate that in the House and Senate. Let's say if you do 12 years in the House, you can go and do 12 years in the Senate. Federally financed campaigns where I have a proposal, it's just an idea, but if you submit 5,000 signatures, perhaps you get, let's say, $300,000 of federally funded campaign. I just know personally, asking people for money, if you donate $25 to me, I'm grateful. And but if you say, well, you have to vote this way, and so I've seen the situation, asking people for money for my campaign. I'm reluctant to ask money from certain people, corporations, PACs, or people with strings attached, because if you donate, a corporation makes a $10,000 max corporate donation. you know, that's essentially a bribe. I view that as a bribe. I, as someone who has, you know, had a top secret security clearance, you know, I have to list all of my, you know, potential conflicts of interest. So I want to make sure that it's not about, you know, a purity test, if you will, but I just feel that the process, it's so tainted that we need to change it. And I think a lot of people currently in office would be in favor of that too, because they want to, at least the good politicians, they want to do their job. They don't want to have to do call time, you know, go to leave the, you know, the Capitol Hill to an office and then make, you know, shake hands with donors and, you know, this and that. But my point is, we need to clean up Washington, and, you know, whether that's a constitutional amendment or passing legislation, you know, we need to pursue multiple paths.
Other questions from the group?
Well, I was thinking about lobbyists. You mentioned funding, and that sounds idealistic, but how does the federal government or any government, so-called democracy, function without the lobbyists that I, you know, I understand what you're saying about John Byer and money.
Sure.
What do you propose other than
I
citizen lobbyists?
I don't want to say they're a good lobbyist. The reality is that legislation, most elected officials do not read the bills that they're advocating for. They have either, you know, hopefully staff who are reading and writing the legislation, or special interest groups, even good special interest groups, are handing them proposed legislation that they then, you know, copy and cut and paste. I don't want to say I'm, you know, in favor of lobbyists, but I just think that we need to do a better job. Capitol Hill, you know, politicians, we need to do a better job of removing. I mean, any of these advocacy groups could still advocate. It's just, why do you have to donate $10,000 or more to these politicians? And I look at, like, us as fired federal employees, we don't have the money to donate to Don Byer or Tim Kaine or Mark Warner, but that's how you get their attention, you know, or you run against them.
I think you sort of alluded to it. There is a difference between accepting information from people and accepting money, whether it be $25 or $25,000. You know, there are gradations of everything, and you could eliminate funding or reduce or whatever, and still have lobbyists providing information, hopefully accurate.
Right.
But,
well, let me give you an example. So I think everyone in this room, I am horrified with what ICE and CBP have been doing to not just illegal, you know, people who are undocumented, but, you know, U.S. citizens. I know from the State Department, when we fund security units overseas and they've committed violations of human rights, we have legislation, they're Leahy vetting, where Leahy laws, where they have to be disbanded. So when I say I'm in favor of disbanding ICE, that doesn't mean no immigration enforcement. It just means that, you know, and I understand as a former federal employee, I don't want to fire innocent people. So it's the question of, how do we reorganize immigration enforcement in a way that weeds out the people who have done, you know, and they should have, it should be a fair investigation. But my point is, how do we put Humpty Dumpty back together in terms of ICE? But that would require working with labor unions and others. And so I'm not someone who's about just throwing out political rhetoric. This is about sitting down with stakeholders, but asking them before you have that conversation to write a check to your campaign. It's just, I'm telling you, as a non-politician running for office, that process is the most, you know, when I say cringe element of it, because it's like, it should be about good ideas. And I recognize that, you know, it can't be, you know, life's complicated, the political process is complicated, but we need to find a system where our elected officials aren't begging for money, because it's impacting their decisions.
I noticed early on you said in your work at the state, you had worked with overseas white supremacist groups. And I was just wondering, you know, we had this example of J.D. Vance stumping for a fascist in Hungary. And a year ago, he was stumping for the Nazis in Germany. So he's got a real record of being extremely, you know, kind of racist. I was just wondering if you'd work, but you can give that information in your professional work.
You know, a year ago, I was still employed by the State Department, and
Right.
some of the groups that we were trying to counter the violent side of those groups, not the political you know, groups in Germany, but the writing was a bit on the wall, and so you know, I think in Germany, you know, it's called the Alternative for Deutschland or the Alternative for Germany. They had some gains, but there's still you know.
Yeah, they're not. The last election went as well as could be hoped. Yeah.
I think in general, it's important that we as liberal, let's say liberal, democratic, respecting individuals, or as supporters of the Democratic Party and you know, liberals overseas, we need to figure out our messaging. And so, you know, Trump just bashed us on being, you know, accusing us of being soft on immigration and
He accused us of hope of being woke. I mean,
you don't mess with someone from Chicago. I want to, yeah.
I'm proud to have my no king. Maybe we should have a no antichrist. I don't know.
You know, I think there's a way of like, I respect secular institutions, but I'm also a lifelong Catholic, and so
yeah.
If I'm engaging in a debate with Republicans, if I need to throw out like a scripture or reference and point out like, hey, for example, there's a prominent story in the Old Testament of when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, the Jews were worshiping the golden calf, and it's like, Donald Trump is the golden calf that they're worshiping, you know? How is this not hypocritical? So, you know, this isn't about getting into like name calling on Fox News or Newsmax, but we need to contest their narratives. And it's shown like Viktor Orban in Hungary. Hungary's one of the poorest countries in the EU, the poorest member.
And Orban's one of the richest.
And he's one, yeah. So I think, and I learned countering terrorism that people leave terrorist organizations not because they stop believing in the mission. It's because they perceive they've either been passed over for a promotion or they see the corruption in their leaders. And so there's a lot of nuance in terms of delegitimizing the MAGA. You know, if we focus on Trump enriching himself and then get our act together, that this doesn't mean deporting, you know, being overzealous in terms of deporting people, but having a fair immigration system where people who are criminals are deported, and then you know, we increase the number of judges and people who can process asylum claims. You know?
And the base of our economic pyramid is not destroyed.
Right. No.
But there's a certain jujitsu element to this. So, for example, one of Donald Trump's main criticism of Ivy League and other elite schools is that they're hotbeds of anti-Semitism. Right. And he uses that as his justification for attacking them economically in terms of research budgets and a lot of other things that aren't really related to anti-Semitism. Right. So how do you address that very complex position that's taken by the Trump administration?
So, you know, there's me as a fired Fed and there's me as a candidate, and they overlap quite a bit. But, you know, as a former counterterrorism official, when I think it was 11 Jews were killed in Australia last November, yeah, I talked to members of the media about how we had programming to counter anti-Semitism in Australia, like plans to do that, that were shelved. You know, I and other experts who are working on those issues were fired. So pointing out the hypocrisy of the Trump administration, that they say they're tough on anti-Semitism, and yet the people who are working on it, and including the people domestically, were either fired or reassigned. So you know, we need to counter, we need to find where the, let's say, the reality or the facts are, and share them with audiences wherever, recognizing that the most loyal MAGA people, their minds are not going to be changed by us. But if you look at the Obama map in 08, and I recognize that that's a different electorate today, it's 18 years later, but the fact that he was able to win Ohio, Florida, Indiana, Iowa, there are Republicans we need to talk to. There are independents we need to talk to. And on the left, this whole hubbub, we're talking more about this guy Hassan Piker than this streamer who's on the left. My point is we need to make sure that every liberal Democratic voter, potential voter, shows up and votes for our candidates, because we're finding too many, like with Kamala Harris, a lot of people had issues with the Biden administration's policies on, with Israel and the war in Gaza. I had my own criticisms, but I find that they were afraid to talk about it. And so again, it goes back to, if we don't have a Democratic president in the White House, our region is going to get wiped out. So,
but the problem is that historically, for 100 years, foreign policy was mostly made by, a bunch of experts in the State Department who spent years at their desk, okay?
Right.
And now all of a sudden it seems to be made by like Jared Kushner or
who's making business deals along the way, and that's the corruption that we need to point out. And it's also the reason we had a century of nonpartisan public servants working on foreign policy is because what we're experiencing now, we experienced in the late 1800s when there was a change in administration. Embassies were completely empty, and people who were assigned by that administration were making business deals. They were looking out for their own self-interest. So,
the spoils system.
The spoil system, of course, yeah. Patronage, yes.
You said, I think I heard the politician Jill Stein. Did you?
Yeah.
Why did you connect her in your concept of democracy?
Because she appears every 4 years, if you will. She kind of disappears into the ether, and then when there's a presidential election, she runs for office, and she'll say things that appeal to people who are, let's say, dissatisfied with the Democratic Party, and she'll peel off enough voters to make a difference in the election, the Electoral College. And I know there are a lot of people who are either on the, let's say, I consider myself a progressive in the mold of Elizabeth Warren, but there are people who are left of me, like much further left. And so those individuals want us to cut off ties to Israel. And, we don't have enough time to talk about, the Israel policies, at length, but my point is that if our nominee, whether it's AOC on one end or Gavin Newsom on the other end, if they don't like those policies, they may vote for her. So my point is that we need to have a dialogue with, again, people on both sides in terms of, when I say both sides, I mean people on the far left and people who are moderate Republicans who want to come over to the Democratic side and talk through, when we talk about healthcare for all, it's not about socialism where a doctor's making the same as a garbage collector like in Cuba. It's more looking at, hey, I've been to Sweden and Norway. People drive really nice cars. I'm envious of their lifestyle, and they also have mental health care and access to doctors. And so I think it's explaining to people what we're trying to accomplish, and we need surrogates for that. And so I want to not just run for Congress, but to be a surrogate who's talking about why USAID matters and why also talking to some rural voters in the potentially new district that they want a domestic Marshall Plan or a domestic equivalent of USAID, where we're rebuilding our hospitals, our green technology, because like in the Northern Neck area I went to last month, there's not a lot of industry over there, or there's not, there are not a lot of gas stations, restaurants, but it's not about, it's about figuring out what type of economic opportunities they could have so that people who are born there, the young people don't have to move away. I'm, being from Chicago, I moved here for the State Department 13 years ago for a job opportunity. And so we need to look at our country as a whole and look at those areas where can we invest in infrastructure and economic development, small business development, because I think that's key to our economy.
Well, my heart is pounding as I listen to you, but I'm also thinking about this. I am such a, well, the UN voted to, this is the reparations concept UN in our country continuously refused to vote or how shall I say it? And it's all based upon from African American ancestry or the descendants of the so-called transatlantic trade.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, what I'm trying to say is the whole concept of economic, whether it's capitalism, socialism,
Sure.
whatever, it seems to be interpreted when it's affecting the continent of Africa, which European countries divided this continent into their concept of whatever, whether it was socialism, capitalism, however they wanted the resources. And at that particular perspective, it has certainly denied the economic prosperity of the economic development of the majority of the people on the planet. And it continues to this day. And whenever I hear how the State Department, whether they sent Colin Powell, walked out on the vote for reparations for African Americans, but that's deep in years in my heart and my whole existence. And I know you're going to hear this from the African Americans constituency, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or independents, that the perspective of the people on this planet seems to think that we are not deserving of prosperity as they see it, because they're saying that the law at that time when they were dealing with enslavement, which the UN said it was the most egregious and inhumane, and put the word crime in it, and the US said, no, we're not dealing with that word crime, which they know because you stole. But anyway, I want to hear you speak for me, and you said Don Byer receives money, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
He did sign the HR 40 bill, and of course, Senator Booker, he has brought it up in the Senate, and we're going to pursue this like never before because we've been dealing with this for many decades now. But anyway, how do you relate to that?
And I have to leave in 5 minutes.
Okay.
But I will try and give you. I'll try and give you. I'm supportive. Coming from Chicago, a very segregated community, I was exposed to at an early age the disinformation, the racism, and I've learned growing up the history, and so it's important that we have accurate history in our schools. And unfortunately, it's been politicized. And so my point is to get to pass that legislation, we also have to socialize, educate people around us about why that's important, why that's essential. And so, it's a yes, and we need to educate people, because I saw that, we accomplished, electing our first African-American president. And then we got Donald Trump, and we got this surge in racism. So,
Well, I would think the issues like Barack Obama
Yeah.
being under Du Bois says in the 21st century, he said in the 20, we were going to deal with the color line.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the problem. And I don't like the word, like Republicans, I would say the color line. They like to be colorblind, even black Republicans say
Yeah.
that. No, I don't want
No,
an illness of color blindness.
and
That's
one,
not-
yeah.
I'll let you go, because
Yeah.
I could.
No,
go on.
yeah, I was.
But it is so much, I've spent 3 or 4 decades with this concept in my heart, and it's coming,
When the average black household has 1/10 the economic resources of the average white household, the effects of slavery are not history.
Okay, but you have an administration that's raising the defense budget from $1 trillion
Oh,
a
yeah.
year to $1.5 trillion a year. I mean, if there isn't going to be a penny, but to do anything else, your proposal or any other proposal.
that's what they say, but if they can find $1 trillion to go on the world, and billions each and every day, that's a bunch of BS from
And
my
70
mind.
billion for ICE.
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy that either. I don't buy that kind of economics, because I know it's not true. You have hedge funds and all this other stuff that used to complicate. But anyway, I don't want to go on, but that's my political thrust when I am going to be dealing with who I vote for
Sure.
and what I advocate.
Well,
Yeah, and if I could just add on, my family came from Northern Ireland. They were Catholics in a Protestant majority. On my mom's side, they were Jews and Catholics from Czech Republic. And had they, in both cases, had they stayed where they stayed, that it would have impacted our family. And so I take the lesson that just because I have white skin and people aren't discriminated against me, I've learned do not discriminate against other people, because my ancestors were discriminated against for various reasons. And so my point is that I feel like a lot of the people who are carrying the tiki torches in Charlottesville in 2017 and elsewhere, January 6th, don't realize their own family history. And so that's why I feel education, I think we have a good education system in Northern Virginia, but you have, I don't want to knock on football coaches, but you have football coaches teaching history that are more focused on, coaching the game on, Saturday than teaching kids what actually happened why did we fight the Civil War? Why do we fight the Revolutionary War? Who built the White House?
Black men.
Yeah.
This was the first that died
Yeah.
in the revolution, with all the accounts they put on
And then-
C-SPAN. I only heard one historical, statement that he did this.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the 250 celebration,
Yeah.
but there's so much history and
I agree.
that used to be told. But anyway.
But
Would you like to take a few minutes to summarize and make your final point and summarize and tell us
It'll
the
be,
website?
yeah, my website is Duffin for VA. I have some postcards. I'll leave them, I'll put them on the tables. And whether you're in the new 8th district or not, I appreciate you listening to me, being an attentive audience. And, I think whether you're in the 8th district and you vote for me or not, our democracy, when we have 2 or 3 good choices on election day, that's important, because I've been disappointed when there's either no candidate or, I don't want to say, oh, I had to vote for this person, or they were the only choice. And we've seen in election cycles when someone either steps down because of scandal or medical reasons, they pass away, there's a special election. It's always, and I've seen this with the special elections in Alexandria or Northern Virginia recently, where the people who won those special elections were kind of like the political insiders. So I'm not trying to tear down the house, but I just recognize for us to win elections, we need to get our act together. Yeah. But thank you for your time.
Dan, one quick thing, I would say, when you're talking to people downstate, out the country, we might bring up the fact that Medicaid next year, because they timed it this way, is going to close a lot of the hospitals out in the country. And those people are really going to be hurting when that Medicaid kicks in after the great, terrible bill.
Right.
Results.
I apologize, I'm leaving because I have a talk I have to do at 2, and
Sure.
I don't leave in the next couple
Yeah,
of minutes.
we're still awaiting the arrival of Susan Cunningham. Oh, there you are. I'm sorry, I've been dragging it out. She snuck in. Okay, well, this is great. We actually have Susan, and she's been very patient with us. She had lunch. That's great. So I have a half-hour speech to introduce her, but she's a member of the county board since 2024. She's been a champion for climate resilience, affordable housing, fiscal balance, government transparency, and community selection. She co-leads the county board's audit committee, serves as liaison to the National Landing Business Development District, Community Oversight Board, and Community Services Board. She's been active in the Council of Government. She was a founding member of the Arlington Joint Facilities Advisory Commission, and she leads a Girl Scout troop. She welcomes refugee families and enjoys hiking in Arlington parks. She earned her Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in Mechanical Engineering from Yale and was a Fulbright Scholar. And she was a professor of physics at the University of Malawi. She and her husband have 2 teenage daughters who attended Arlington Public Schools. It's so great to meet a fellow physicist. And we give you Susan Cunningham, who has to come here and look into this camera.
Oh, great, okay, because we got some people.
Well,
Remote.
we do tape record this.
Oh, nice. You can tell me 5 years from now what I said.
Nice, that's always good.
Well, good. Well, I know you guys have had a full day already, so and you also know me a little bit from previous times. So I would mostly like to make sure that you have time to ask questions. I can share we're 90% of the way through the budget season, so we're tired and have scratches up and down from fighting with each other, but we will get there. We'll pass up the next Wednesday and the markups on Thursday. But otherwise, just a lot of focus on keeping our economy going, especially for our federal workers, dealing with the constant excitement from across the river and trying to anticipate what's coming next. Yes, exactly. And then ensuring, doing what we can to make sure that people are whole during this time, because it's really a very heavy time for our young people and for all of us, really. So making sure that we've still got folks connected. But yeah, I think I would just make sure if you have questions, I want to make sure we hit those because I know the time is going to run out pretty quickly. Or if there are questions that came up before I arrived that were county questions, happy to hit those as well.
Okay, well, I'll start off with the first question. How do you feel the county budget process is going? And to what degree is it influenced by the fact that a lot of the community block grants and so on that we have relied upon very heavily in the past are put under suspicion in the president's proposed budget?
Yeah. I would say there are 3 big pressures for the county. One is kind of all the federal actions, both in direct removal of funds. So for instance, our anti-terrorism work that started after September 11th, for some reason, DOJ decided it was great to take that away. I don't really understand, but there are a lot of things like that where we can't not have anti-terrorism work sitting right here next to the National Capitol. So we're backfilling a lot of those and trying to, last year I fought really hard to start the year with a contingency fund because we didn't know what we didn't know. So we started the year with $11.5 million that we restrained ourselves from spending. Turns out that's going to be real helpful to cover Snow Creek, which was probably the biggest of the unexpecteds of the year. We've been, it's just starting to amp up now. There was a lot of bluster last year, but there weren't as many actual stoppages. And so we're trying to figure out for this coming year, is that enough? Do we need to do more? Can we do a little less because we have spending pressures as well? So the federal government writ large, and that includes the revenue pressures of having a shutdown for a month, having people unemployed, and so our regular tax revenues are also declining for the year, while our expenses, shockingly, like yours, are not declining. The other pressure really is at the state level. So, and that's indirect. Probably the biggest impact on us, in part, comes through the state. So the federal government is really monkeying, especially for the blue states, with SNAP funding, for food, with housing funding, with Medicaid rules and absurdities. And so that creates more expense for us at the local level because we administer all those programs, but it also impacts what the state can do for us. And we have a long history in Northern Virginia of supporting the state. We put more in than we get out, and that's A-okay because we're one big commonwealth, but we are disproportionately impacted this time. And so there's a little bit of a constant reminder with our state delegation that, like, you can't use the average from 5 years ago. You've got to look at this year because, we are not pulling in revenues the same way. We do not have employment the same way. And we can't use all of our funding to subsidize the rest of the Commonwealth. And then I guess the third area is schools. So schools, they've had a little bit taken back. They've had a lot of bluster and a lot of legal costs associated with that. But, we sort of try to manage together to make sure that if they're hit harder than we are, or we are hit harder than they are, that we can move some of those contingencies around.
Other questions? Yes, Paula.
How has the tax income side, can you go into a little bit more,
Sure.
more specifics about what has happened and how are we affected?
Yeah. So it's it's always a bad year, right? So you always start the session with it being with doom and gloom. What's been happening over time is, like, the biggest driver is the change in how office properties operate and whether they operate. So if you look at our office vacancy or commercial property vacancy, it spiked in 2000. BRAC was 2004 or 3 when the base realignment started. We started losing folks, and then again when they started moving some of the agencies out, and then it really spiked when COVID happened, and even the for-profit entities were using less office space. And so that's the biggest piece of sort of revenues that used to be there going largely away. And that's because you can't, for older office space, nobody wants to rent it. So if you build a brand new fancy building, people will rent it because they want to attract their folks to come back to the office and interact with each other. But the kind of 80s building, you think of all of Crystal City, basically, right? Of all those 60s, 70s, 80s government buildings, essentially. Nobody really wants to live in them anymore. And so, to work in them anymore. So that, and if you've been in Arlington a long time, there was sort of the idea of the 50-50 split between commercial and residential. It's in commercial includes all the multifamily residential. So it's still like a 55-50 split because the apartments are doing so well. But all that commercial property, which conveniently also doesn't need to be educated or to have staff benefits or anything else, that's all kind of a declining business. Yeah, I know. So I guess the good news is it creates an opportunity for creativity. They essentially, and we'll be talking about one of them at our next meeting in May, I think, that when is it, like 1900 Bell Street South, right on top of the Crystal City metros, and on the top of the underground, there's, these big tall buildings that, and there used to be 20 of them. We're gradually working through them and either tearing them down or converting them. But one of those buildings essentially has no value in the world at this moment, and so it's actually it's more of a liability than a value, because to do anything with it, you can't rent it right now, and to do anything with it, you have to tear it down or invest in it. So we're really working with the developers and the owners to say, okay, like, that's not good for you, it's not good for us, it's not good for the community to have empty buildings that aren't productive. So how can we accelerate the either conversion or some other innovation?
Isn't it cheaper to convert than to tear down and rebuild? Or?
It depends. Yeah, it really depends. And so it hadn't been, which is why it hadn't been happening very often. It's only really once there's no value in the existing building that becomes the case. And part of that is the construction costs are still high and tariffs are high. So building anything new is kind of hard. And that in some ways is helping say, leave it and try to reconfigure it. But it's only in the last 2 years that it's even become moderately interesting to do the reuse, because most of our buildings are thick, and so when you reuse them for a hotel or for a residential or even for something, sweaty and, athletic, you need a lot more ventilation, you need a lot more daylight. And so you have to cut through the core. And so, some of the older historic buildings in DC made sense faster because A, they lost value faster, and B, they were easier to have windows and to create into residential. But we're starting to, we created the push, I guess, 1.5 years ago, and I think we've had 6 approved so far. We've got 2 more coming next month.
Mechanical engineer, you would.
I get excited.
Well, you understand.
Yeah, I know it's hard, and you can't cut the slab, and you need, it's just annoying. People need daylight. So much better if we could just pack people underground right now.
Okay, well, to focus on something very narrow, where do you stand on the sign ordinance? The campaign sign
Yeah, absolutely. That was a hot one. So when I ran for office, it was in the year where we have 2 seats open. We had 6 candidates for just that. We had 3 candidates for sheriff. We had 2 for Commonwealth attorney. It was like bonkers on the medians, and actually kind of unsafe, both for the volunteers trying to like wedge things in there and for people trying to drive and walk past like the very end of a median that was completely covered with signs. So Maureen and I wrote, on the campaign trail, we were like, we have to do something if we win, we need to figure out how to manage this a little bit. It had gotten more extensive because of early vote. So, we had a rule that was like 30 days before the election. But then when early vote started, that became 70 days, because it was 30 days before the 40 days. And then you multiply that by 2 in a normal year, 4 or 5 in this year, and you end up with just signs all the time, all over the place. It's a burden for our, our mowing teams and for our zoning enforcement teams. So it's not free for the county. So what Maureen and I asked the staff to do about 1.5 years ago was study what options we could consider that would be reasonable. And that's what you saw come through 2 months ago, a month ago, was, banning them outright, which is of course like the easiest to enforce and simplest, but was not well received, and then it's changing the timeline, changing the number of signs you could have in each median. And so we worked through that and kind of came to a compromise, but I was in favor of especially the timeline restricting and then trying to address some of the safety issues, because I want us to have that avenue of voice, but I don't want to have pedestrian deaths happening.
Well, if you read the current ordinance, there are sight line limitations on where in the median strip you can put them.
Yeah,
I unfortunately was one of the members of a bipartisan task force that came up with the current ordinance.
Yeah.
We had two Republicans and myself and Warren Nelson as the authors of that. You should get your guidance from others.
Yes.
Herschel, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was at the thing last night with legislators, and there was somebody fairly exercised about this thing with the churches and
Faith and housing bill.
So,
Yeah.
kind of, what is the issue? What happened? Did the governor sign something? Or
Yeah. So, and I glanced at it this afternoon because she did sign something last night, or sent something back. And that's really funny because the person you're talking about is calling me right now. Yes, the faith and housing bill it was a version of it has been around for I think 2 years, right? Which is saying, how do we make it easier for churches to get to the point where they can, decide whether to build housing and then build it reasonably efficiently.
What's the difference between that and, let's say, what happened in The one near where Mary Hines lives, that church.
Yeah, Clarendon. Yeah, so what's challenging about the bill, but so that sounded great, like that idea is great. We all want churches to be able to contribute to the community. But as with any bill that you're trying to jam through our General Assembly, the details matter a lot. And so the bill that went in this year was taking away all local control, basically in zoning, which didn't go very well with the jurisdictions in general, since that's one of the few things we have. So that was one concern, but the bigger concern is for Arlington, because we have done so much special exceptions to try to shape the metro core, that the rules that they were coming up with for the rest of the Commonwealth were going to not just make buildings that didn't really make a lot of sense on the church property, but likely cause resistance to other development projects, because you can sort of see how it connects. And so that's why Barbara Favola and I, in the end, wrote to the governor to say, for Arlington, this is actually going to move us back a little bit rather than moving forward. Like we do many church projects, like the ones that they used as examples in Richmond were all done either in Arlington or by an Arlington provider. It's not that we're resisting it. And then we do move those really quickly. Like every February, every year, we're going to move something through that's an affordable housing project, because there's a deadline in March. They're always like only 90% baked, but we still move them forward. And the most recent of those was Lecky Gardens, that we did a site plan, but it took 5 months, and that's like not very long. So the proposal, what the bill that went to her said was that you could buy right on any property owned by a faith institution or a tax-exempt nonprofit. You could build to the max of the zoning. You could build to the max of the adjacent zoning or any existing building 500 feet away. And so if you think about, if you're in Roslyn, and you're in Roslyn, the tallest building is 35 stories, but there's like townhouses and single family, 5 blocks away. It would basically say one of those townhouses can go to 35 stories, which would never happen, but it's just weird. It's just weird. And then it creates the friction. Again, if you think of Roslyn, the Marriott site, we hope will be getting redeveloped soon. There's going to be the normal process of, can we go to 20 stories? Can we go to 30 stories? And we get benefit if we give more value, but the community has to be willing and accepting of that value. And if that's going to then cause sort of a trigger of other buildings, it's, in my view, going to create more tension and friction, which then it creates less housing and creates less revenue, both for us and for the Commonwealth. So that's why I spoke up.
So the governor made an exception.
She made some tweak, and I don't understand it. Like I read the sentence, and they sent it to our lawyers to try to clarify it. I think what the intent of the tweak was, you can build to the height of anything within the by right height of anything with 500 feet, not what's there now that got there by special exception. But it's like many legislative things, it really just says, sue me, I'm not being clear. So they're going to have to figure that out. And I think CivFed has an event tonight where Barbara and Takas are going to be getting grilled on that bill in particular. So it may get clearer or it may get murkier. Who knows? Yeah.
Any other questions? Do you want
us to raise your taxes a lot, a little, none? Yes.
You were just talking about this bill. Our city construction misconstrued anything.
Yeah.
Wants and desires. I'm not so interested in wants and desires as much as.
Yeah. I would flip it back to you as like what's working and what's not, because the question was, how can we better communicate with the community so that they know about a bill like this that's coming. And it was funny, last night that question was asked of our General Assembly, saying you need to educate us more about how you do your work, because it's crazy and we don't understand how to influence it, and we found out too late, we can't find the bill and that sort of thing. And so yes, like there's always the need for more communication. We also heard from our fiscal affairs advisory yesterday saying you should do less communication because it's really expensive and like you should just have a federal register where people can come and look stuff up. So it's a question. I think we're all so overloaded with information. It's in my view, it's like how do we empower a civic federation to have the answer, or a school to educate the kids, or a HOA to be able to funnel it down. But even then, it's we laugh, like there are people who don't know they live in a county.
Right.
Let's start there, right? And I mean, Maureen tells the story of like there's a person she like goes to dinner with every month who lives in the same building as her. And their signs were all over the place, and and she didn't know she was running for county board and didn't know what county board was. Like it's just a lot of stuff like doesn't register for people. But we're always open to things. I think this year we're doing more open door Mondays, like in person. We're alternating in person and not. And that's been like very different people show up for the 2 different formats. We're doing 2 town halls this year as the board. And then each of us try to share stuff out when we can, but it's like, it's an infinite, I don't know. And I haven't cracked what works and what doesn't, but always welcome for feedback. We have a great comms team for the staff that are trying different things. We've been trying like having community liaisons into some of the less represented communities, since the civic associations haven't always, found them if the language is different or, they're more transient. But it's a pickle. If you see anything others are doing that you like, let us know.
So do you want to just summarize and
Sure.
tell us what's the best way to follow the county board, the internet or whatever?
Yeah. Great. So yeah, to follow what's going on for the county stuff, the best thing is to go on the Arlington County website and go to Engage Arlington. Always has all the things that are open, all the surveys that are open. But it also has a place where you can check off, I'm interested in housing, I'm interested in planning commission. If you check too many of them, you'll get too many emails. That's what I did. And then you could always go and look there. You can watch all the commission meetings or planning or board meetings. So you can, skim through those, watch them on 2X, laugh at people talking like chipmunks. That's kind of fun. And you can come to any of those. So all our meetings are open. If you have specific feedback, you can always either call the office or email us. If both of them get tracked, but email is sometimes a little faster. Or just call us up, come see us. The board's very, very accessible right now, so don't be bashful.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
I owe you a deep apology. I sort of let the previous speaker go for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I didn't see you come in.
No, it's okay. It's all fine. So thank you guys for sticking around and reach out anytime.
Thanks for all the work you do.
You're welcome.
Okay, so just a couple of brief reminders. The Blue Victory dinner is on the 25th. The vote on the referendum is on the 21st. And
Early voting is going on.
now through Saturday. And we will also have our next meeting the second Tuesday in May. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob.
Oh, did I forgot to cut that out. We did that a few months ago. I'm sorry.